right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to City Hall, and we've got a public hearing this evening, as you know. Looks like we have a scout troop here, so welcome. Always glad to see y'all down here. All right, we have a first matter scheduled for public hearing is a street closing on East Whitaker Mill Road right-of-way, and we should have Amanda Jones with our transportation.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Amanda Jones with Transportation. I'll be giving a brief presentation on a street closure for a portion of East Whitaker Mill Road. So the area indicated in red is the closure area. This is located on the south side of East Whitaker Mill Road. It's located just north of Capitol Boulevard and in between Carson Street and Center Road. Here we go, sorry. So the closure area is approximately 141 square feet. There is a development plan in review for 6-unit townhomes at this location, and that development will be making improvements along East Whitaker Mill Road. East Whitaker Mill Road is an Avenue 2-lane divided street type, and this closure is excess right-of-way for that type of street. And lastly, the closure does align with our policy T2.7 of the 2030 Comprehensive Plan. All right, and lastly, here is an image of what it looks like today. So as you can see, this closure would just be aligning the right-of-way with the adjacent property. And that is my presentation.
All right, thank you. Do you have questions for Ms. Jones? Okay, if not, then we can open the public hearing for East Whitaker Mill, and I have 2 folks signed up to support it, Samuel Nye, and Tim King. All right, and y'all have 8 minutes combined time.
Okay, thank you very much. Sam Nye with the site group. My office address is 1111 Oberlin Road in Raleigh. I'm the civil engineer on the project and wanted to be here to answer any questions if y'all have any.
Okay. Any questions? All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm Tim King. I live at 10724 Beaver Pond Lane in Raleigh. The reason for the street closure petition is to align the adjacent lot that I also own, to line it up and just clean it up, because currently it does not run parallel with Whitaker Mill Road. So we did this same street closing petition back in 2010 on that adjacent lot. So it's this same abandoned street, and the council approved it back in 2010, and we're just asking for that to get approved for this.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yep. Any questions? All right. There's no other, then I will close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution ordering the closing and related actions with the conditions outlined.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Right. Ayes have it. Thank you. Right. Next, we have petition annexation AX0924, which is 2801 Old Cruise Road, and a number of different addresses on Old Milburnie Road.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Pat Young with Planning and Development. I'm going to turn it over to Hannah Reckow of our team to present the annexation and zoning case, but I did want to very briefly draw your attention back to the conversation we had at your recent council retreat regarding growth and annexation, particularly at our urban fringe and the northeast and southeast parts of our community where there's so much growth. This project is in the northeast part of our community. It is outside of the extraterritorial jurisdiction. It is relatively far from existing services. I just wanted to take a moment to remind you that we have two things forthcoming. The first is modifications to our administrative processes to ensure that you all hear and get to decide on annexation cases before we have any binding commitments to applicants for annexation, so that you all are in the driver's seat about how we grow and where we grow. That is in process, and you'll get an updated Manager's Weekly report in the coming weeks. The second piece is that staff is working to identify what we're going to call priority growth areas. These are areas where staff believes, and we're going to present you with criteria that help document this, that based on prior council actions and existing services, prior council actions meaning annexations in the vicinity, that we believe growth is cost-effective and reasonable, because what it does is capitalize on the existing commitments that the council has made through annexing property in areas. And to have more property under city control means more revenue, means properties that are developed to city standards, which helps protect property values and helps build a better community, versus those areas where we have not made prior commitments to growth, and we would recommend through policy that you not annex until such time as we have a fiscally constrained plan to provide services in those areas, or until we find partners in Eastern Wake County who may want to serve those areas. So that'll be coming within the next couple of months. We believe that the presentation that Hannah is going to present you tonight will give you enough information about the different service impacts for this property that you can make an informed decision in that regard. And Bynum and I will be happy to answer any questions on that bigger picture when Hannah's done with her presentation.
Counselor Silver.
Patrick, just one question. You mentioned priority areas. Is that I'm assuming that's outside the ETJ, these priority areas, correct?
Right. So we are analyzing the ETJ and outside the ETJ. ETJ is an area where we have made a not legally binding, but a expectation for property owners that they will be brought into the city. We'll focus on these areas right outside the ETJ where there's a lot of interest to develop. And that's where we will develop these criteria about where we have existing services, where prior annexations, as in this case, for example, there's a satellite annexation that's immediately adjacent called Rivertown that was brought into the city limits about 20 years ago. So that's, I hope I answered your question. And I think we're going to be looking at the area primarily right outside the ETJ, but we'll also look at some of the ETJ areas and talk about whether they are appropriate for near-term growth.
So let me clarify my question. So I know there was a recommendation to do a northeast and southeast study area. Mm-hmm. Are these priority areas instead of those study areas, or I'm just trying to understand the sequencing so I understand, because we had a retreat, we talked about the northeast study area, the southeast study area, so it sounds like the priority areas is that part of that conversation? This is something that's trying to at least get ahead of it if and when those studies are undertaken.
Yes, sir. So that's a really good point. So we have two large areas. Each one is about the same size as inside the Beltline, so these are large areas. In the northeast and southeast part of the community, as Councilmember Silver said, they're called the Southeast Special Study Area, SESA, and the Northeast Special Study Area, NESA. The Southeast Special Study Area was completed last year or in 2023. That looked at, had a kind of proto version of this priority growth area concept that we're bringing to you in the coming months. The Northeast Special Study Area was out for bid when we decided to kind of put a pause on that. And before we do further study about the growth in both of these areas, we want to bring you areas where we feel like there's both value and a commitment to grow in the near term. And then we will do significant additional study in those areas where we have not made commitments to growth to make sure that you all have all the information you need to make good decisions about whether we should grow in those areas, and if so, when we should grow in those areas. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Madam Mayor.
Any other questions for Mr. Young while he's up?
I do. So in the beginning, you mentioned commitments as far as annexations. Have there been any made, because it's a policy change that we're making, have there been any made to this one as far as connections?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
You were seeing the annexation and the zoning tonight, right?
Okay.
So there have not been any approvals, to my knowledge, that would bind or influence council's decision tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Right, thank you.
All right, good evening. Hannah Reckow, Planning and Development. So as was just mentioned, this item is an annexation request for a large assemblage. It's located outside of Raleigh's ETJ. The item following is a rezoning request for that same area. So I have a joint presentation to cover both before you proceed with each of the hearings separately. And then as a reminder, because it is outside the ETJ, when you do act, you'll have to ask sequentially, starting with the annexation request. So request AX 924, assemblage of properties, a little over 240 acres. It's outside Raleigh's ETJ, but is adjacent to city limits. That includes satellite limits here, and also a city-owned property to the north, the Watkins Road Park property. The proposed development is residential. The site is generally surrounded by residential, largely low-scale rural, and then water and sewer are not immediately available. Water's located off of Old Cruise Road, and then sewer is available off of Buffalo Road to the south, and then also Watkins Road to the north. Extension of those services would be responsibility of the developer. So current zoning in the area, I'll cover this in more detail in a moment, but the site has Wake County zoning. Most of the surrounding area also, being in the county, has county zoning. You can see areas of Raleigh's corporate limits with Raleigh zoning here. It's all residential in nature. So given this is a larger request than typical outside the ETJ, I'm going to walk through some additional considerations that may be helpful for your discussion of these items. They fall into sort of two categories: the jurisdictional context and the impact of and on eligibility of annexation in this area, and then the city infrastructure and services that would become available to the site upon annexation. So first, just to situate ourselves, this site, as I mentioned, it is between satellite corporate limits, the Rivertown property to the sort of southeast, and then the northwest, not shown here, but oops, that's not. Located at the very north of the property is publicly owned land, which is what allows the site to petition for annexation. This is the Northeast Special Study Area, or NESA. And then the city has annexation agreement lines with adjacent municipalities. You can see the Rollsville annexation line following Mitchell Mill Road, and the Knightdale annexation line following Buffalo Road. And then in yellow are the annexation since 2011. So that represents kind of our current era of annexation that we're in after the point that the state restricted municipalities' ability to involuntarily annex. So the yellow properties are property owners that have voluntarily petitioned the city for annexation since that time. As you may recall, the city has several resolutions defining in what circumstances the city would consider annexation of property outside the ETJ. One of those circumstances is when a site or assemblage of sites is adjacent to city limits or public land. In this case, as I mentioned, it's the Watkins Road Park property, which touches the very north portion of this assemblage. If this were annexed, it would connect that public land with what is currently satellite corporate limits to the southeast. So to give you a sense of what is currently, pre this annexation, eligible for petition, those are shown in red. So that encompasses the current ETJ and then properties that are adjacent to corporate limits. Also wanted to give a sense of what the picture would look like if this property were annexed. So the picture of eligibility would grow significantly. So the gap between the Rivertown property and contiguous corporate limits sort of bridged, and that opens up a significant number of other properties shown in red here that could petition the city for annexation. I'll note that even in the before picture, it's really most likely to be the larger properties that would petition for annexation. Some of these sort of smaller county subdivisions are probably less likely to collectively petition for annexation all at once. Okay, I'm going to shift now to look at sort of the slate of city infrastructure and services that become available once a property is annexed. So areas in city limits obviously have Raleigh zoning. Development is subject to the infrastructure standards in the UDO. New streets are city maintained, and everything else is, in this picture, state maintained. So the streets outlined in dark are current City of Raleigh maintained roads. It shows kind of the picture of residential development in the area. What you don't see here are any streets on Rivertown. Obviously, that property has not yet developed, but once it does, would contain city-maintained streets. So to that point, Rivertown was annexed in 2006, and so at that point, that action represented a commitment to serve those properties. So the annexation of additional land could add additional potential future residents to the area, and that in that way could make future investments and infrastructure and services in this area more efficient in that way. And I think this is true of all the services we discuss. So parks and greenways, you can see a number of city and county properties here. The closest developed park facilities are along the Neuse River on the left-hand side of this image, the Horseshoe Farm Nature Preserve and the Buffalo Road Athletic Park, and of course the Neuse River Greenway running along the river north-south. Watkins Road property, as I mentioned, and also the Hodges Mill Creek property are city-owned, but there is not currently planned for facilities at this time. The closest property that has received, has some planning activity recently is the Forestville Road property. So turning now to public safety, fire service, the site is in an area with known fire service considerations, so the response time standards are not currently met. There are, as you know, ongoing fire service master plan to look at this issue. The two closest stations are at Forestville Road and Mitchell Mill Road, and then down along Buffalo Road. Just east of this site is a Wake County station, and then the next closest one is off to the east in Wendell. And also mention that the Rivertown rezoning for that site includes a condition that if the city would like to take the owners up on it, of a piece of property to locate a fire station. Looking at police service, based on the location, seems likely to be in the Northeast District, although it is also close to the North District. So exactly where that would end up might depend on kind of road circulation and the ability to serve that area. Water and sewer is often the main service that influences that property owners are seeking to connect to when they petition for annexation. In the kind of big picture here, I wanted to point out the merger communities, the city's merger communities that Raleigh Water is already serving. That includes Roseville to the north and Knightdale to the south. The site is in the long-range utility service area, and I think the size of that area kind of reflects the Raleigh Water's planning to serve this area, regardless of whether or not the city grows into it. And then I'll just point out closest treatment plants, the E.M. Johnson Water Treatment Plant and Smith Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant off to the northwest. And then future Little River Reservoir and Treatment Plant and Little Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant in eastern Wake County. Oops. And then solid waste services, so trash pickup Again, this map is really a map of residential developments in the area. If Rivertown develops it with attached, or in some circumstances, townhouse development, you'd see something on the map there too. And as you can see, it's a Wednesday collection pickup. And then finally, wanted to touch on the sort of difference between Wake County and City of Raleigh development regulations. So if annexed and if Raleigh zoning is applied, developers would come to Raleigh and would be held to the UDO standards instead of the Wake County UDO. So this image here is from a county subdivision just southwest of this site. I think it's pretty typical of the density and sort of infrastructure, road and stormwater infrastructure that's really typical under county development. More specifically, there are no sidewalk requirements, curb and gutter requirements under Wake County development, and then you don't have the ability to connect to public water and sewer. It's well and septic, or in some cases, private water and sewer, and that really impacts the scale, density of development that's possible. So I'll shift now to the rezoning request, which is Z1224. It is the same assemblage of properties. They have R30 zoning under Wake County zoning. They're requesting R6 conditional use for the majority of the site. There is a small portion of one property that would not, the conditions would not apply to, and that's existing residents that I believe the owner wants to maintain living there. Another aerial context, as I think we've covered now, it's largely residential in the area, but I think this shows both the mostly undeveloped nature of the site and also the lot lines here, I think, paint the picture of sort of the surrounding subdivisions and scale of development. I want to point out a few other things. So the Hodges Mill Creek bisects the property. There's associated floodplain surrounding that. And then there are several Raleigh street plan streets bisecting the property from Watkins Town Road, how obvious it is there, to Old Cruise Road, and then part of a larger future connection at Labrador Drive off to the southeast. So here's some views from the street showing the sort of rural nature of the surrounding area. There are 14 proposed conditions. This is really the sort of high-level summary. There's much more detail available in the agenda backup. But first two conditions pertain to open space, so 40% of the site would be designated as open area. A minimum of 30% of the site would remain as undisturbed area, and those two areas could overlap. There is a commitment to make a contribution to the city to support fire service, station, or equipment in the area, and then a condition specifying the amenity areas that would be available on the site, so one main and then two pocket parks. It lists the types of facilities that could fulfill that condition, and then also the sort of location of them so that residential properties are within a half a mile of one of those areas. There is a commitment to a wider greenway corridor easement of 75 feet, and then a cap on total number of dwelling units, 550, and then some specification by building type. Apartment building type is prohibited, although in R6, that's really permitted only in a conservation development option, so this condition takes that off, that ability off the table. And then some landscaped protective yards established along adjacent properties and along Old Mill Burney Road. Together, those are roughly the sort of top west, north, and east part of the property, part of the surrounding the site. And then there are two conditions that speak to traffic management and calming features that will be used along the internal streets. That's condition 10 and 11. There is a commitment to install double silt fencing at grading and construction phases, commitment to establish dedicated electrical vehicle charging outlets for all units, and then finally, additional stormwater discharge management, the addition of the 25-year storm event. So big picture, going from county zoning to city zoning, smaller lots, smaller setbacks, and therefore additional units could be established on the site. The future land use guidance in this area is low-scale residential, with the exception of the creek corridor, which is public parks and open space. Request is consistent with those designations. But the request is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan overall. Consistent policies, again, our future land use map, and then really the increase in housing entitlement. Inconsistent policies is a touching on infrastructure, the timing of infrastructure, and then the location of growth outside the ETJ. And then finally, the Planning Commission recommended approval 6-1. The one opposing vote, the commissioner noted the lack of nearby commercial or employment centers to support additional residential, the lack of transit service, and so the combination of that pushing this to be more car-oriented development. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay. Questions for Ms. Reckow? Councilor Patton.
Thanks. Appreciate you mentioning some of the development standards that would be applicable under county zoning. Do you know anything about? I realize this is like not your field or not your jurisdiction, but anything about like the stream buffers that they have as compared to ours, or floodplain regulations?
Not off the top of my head. I don't know if. I think stormwater staff is coming to help with that.
Good evening, Ben Brown, Stormwater. The county doesn't have any more extensive stream buffer requirements than we do. They use the state's minimum neutral buffer rules, the same as we do in a non-watershed area like this. As far as the floodplain, they wouldn't. They are not any more stringent, like with our latest update either.
They're equivalent to us?
Yeah, they're equivalent to ours for floodplain, with our last update that we had. So.
Well, you know I care deeply about the last update. All right, cool, thank you. And then, Hannah, do you know if, I know the Rivertown development, which is sort of like catalyzing the whole reason why this case can even really be coming before us, was approved almost 20 years ago. Do you know if any activity has happened on that site since then?
There has been a few development plans that have been submitted in recent years. I don't know any more detail about kind of status other than that, but there has been some movement, yeah.
And can you confirm my memory or phone a friend? I think we approved some sort of water pump or water infrastructure for them, maybe in my past term.
Pump station, I believe.
What's coming down?
Raleigh Water.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Whit Wheeler, Raleigh Water. So yes, actually Raleigh Water has a contract to provide water and sewer service that would reach the Rivertown community. It was a mutual agreement that was actually part of the original annexation that happened many years ago. It's a continuation of that. I do know that our office has approved construction plans for water and sewer infrastructure in Rivertown.
Excellent, thank you for confirming that. I thought I remembered it, but I want to make sure. And then, Hannah, can you confirm if a TIA will be required for this case later on down the road?
I think transportation staff can probably speak to that. I did want to just go back quickly and add on the sort of development movement. Forgot that the last year was a rezoning for the southern part of the Rivertown
That's right.
parcel, so I think that reflects also some stuff happening.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah. There's a little rock, paper, scissors happening about who's going to answer this question.
Sorry about that, Carter Robertson, Transportation. There was a TIA required for this site. I'm not sure if the applicant is going to touch on that in their presentation.
Okay. And so maybe I misunderstand the process. So TIAs that are done before the rezoning is complete are exploratory and not legally binding, and then another one has to be done with the site plan approval, and those ones are regulatory. Is that correct?
I may have to defer to someone else in transportation, but basically what this TIA has is recommendations on how to mitigate the development and other developments in the area, a lot on Buffalo and Forestville Road. I'm not sure about which is regulatorily binding. May have to defer to Bradley here.
Thanks, sir. Bradley, Kimball Transportation. Fantastic question. TIA at the rezoning stage helps us to kind of evaluate the increase in intensity proposed, whereas at the site plan, we're able to see actual projected trips, how an access point, how it would operate, how an intersection adjacent would also operate if there are any challenges. Because these are state facilities in and around the site, we would also know that DOT would review that TIA, and they would also provide requirements to mitigate the impacts.
Okay. So any information that's presented from a TIA existing is hypothetical, and then the one that comes, one will be required later, and that one will be binding.
At the development review stage, yes.
Thank you. I'm good for now.
Other questions? Okay, so we'll go ahead and open the public hearing on AX 0924 and Collier Marsh.
Good evening, Mayor Cowell, members of council. I am Collier Marsh with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street here on behalf of the applicant. I have representatives of Lennar, McAdams, and Kinley Horn, our development team, here as well to answer any questions you may have. This is a combined presentation for both the annexation and the rezoning. We've covered the site already in some detail, so jumping to the comprehensive plan analysis. To start, we're spot on with the future land use map designation. We're proposing R6, single-family homes, townhomes, and large amounts of open space, which is exactly what the plan calls for with this designation. Now, when you look at this excerpt in the Northeast Special Study area, it looks like we're an island in the middle of an undeveloped area, but that's really not the case. There's a lot of precedent for development when Raleigh approved rezonings and projects in the surrounding area. I understand that the Rivertown project is in construction drawings and proceeding, where there's land set aside for a future fire station. So the city of Raleigh has already set precedent for development in this area and has kind of come up with conditions that are expected of developers to ensure that we're addressing the concerns that have been expressed related to the annexation. And so we've heard those concerns through our rezoning conditions. We hope to establish that we're addressing them very well. But again, a lot of precedent for development in Raleigh, but there's an alternative development pattern going on here as well. There's an alternative to every case, and that would be Wake County zoning here. Wake County R30 would have 30,000 square foot lots, large lots, single family, much lower density. I saw the numbers. You could have up to 300 homes. That's assuming you develop every single possible acre. What we're proposing here, at least on the detached side, is 5,000 square foot lots compared to 30,000. So there's a big change in the number of units that you can accomplish by bringing this into the city of Raleigh. Just starting with the annexation, to cross a couple things off the list here, we do tie into the City of Raleigh's future planned park on the northeast, but we're also taking that satellite Rivertown limit and creating a more continuous connection, taking former satellite and tying it in. When you look at the city's 10-year fiscal analysis for this site, we're revenue positive from day one. So for all 10 years, we are revenue positive over $4 million, and then about 2.5 when you count for CIP. When we address other service concerns through a contribution to the City of Raleigh's fire department, we looked at what the other cases were asked to do, and we met that same on a per unit basis, that same contribution. And then public utilities, how are those going to be provided? It's going to be through developer-funded constructed improvements to the infrastructure that allows future capacity for the area. And then the rezoning itself offers a number of substantial benefits that go beyond what would be allowed if we were to develop in Wake County. We're proposing R6 conditional use, except for that one section in the northeast corner that's being kept by the homeowners, and there's a cell tower at the rear that renders it essentially undevelopable anyway. Again, single-family homes, townhomes, and open space are the defining features of this project, but we have extensive zoning conditions. We started out with about 100-plus neighbors at a neighborhood meeting with a lot of questions, and we have none here tonight in opposition because we've worked really hard on this. Substantial open space commitments and undisturbed area commitments. We've covered fire contributions, but we've also addressed park service, and we've had meetings with Parks and Recreation. What we heard from them is that although there may be public service in the future, we want to ensure that this project provides park services for its residents. And so we're doing that through a main amenity as well as pocket parks that are committed through our zoning conditions. We've also addressed greenway comments from Parks and Recreation. We have a unit cap that is, one, to inform the neighbors of what the actual proposal and vision is here, but two, to inform the voluntary TIA. So our project was not required to do a TIA because of the number of trips that are generated, but we did one because we knew better, and it was really important to the community, and it led to a lot of important results. Apartments are prohibited, and that is because of fire service concerns. The fire department can know there will not be apartments to serve with this project. And then we have a number of commitments to address neighbor comments, from buffers to traffic calming. And then finally, at the end here, we have 3 environmental commitments because we want to set a precedent for development in this area that we're going to be more sustainable. We're going to have double silt fencing during construction, EV charging on every single home, and then enhanced stormwater controls beyond what would be required in Wake County. We had a concept plan to inform our discussions with our neighbors, and I'll rotate it 90 degrees and zoom in to point out a few items. The open area and undisturbed area is what's shown in green. The yellow is the areas where we envision development here. Kind of zoom out a little bit and look to the top of the page, and you can see areas where there's existing Wake County development. You can see that the ratios of developed area to forested area are roughly the same. But on our site, we're proposing up to 550 units, and when we look to Wake County, we got a dozen or so. There's a big benefit to bringing this into the City of Raleigh and having a much more efficient use of the land. We also have our parks and open space shown with those blue stars on this to show where they'd be located throughout the community. A TIA was not required. I've got another 20 slides on the back end that we could cover, but the point we want to make is that one of the big benefits of bringing these projects into the City of Raleigh and bringing this density are the privately funded transportation improvements that projects are bringing. So we studied a number of projects in our TIA, and this slide, as well as this slide, show all of the TIA improvements that those projects we studied are bringing. Then when you factor in our improvements on this slide, as well as our improvements on this next slide, the result is really meaningful traffic improvements that go far beyond mitigating the impacts of this project and go towards addressing existing issues that the city is experiencing, especially in that Buffalo Road corridor. So with our improvements, they're shown in red. Other projects are shown in green. One that stands out to me, and the 3 circles in the middle, are red improvement. There is a left turn lane for vehicles that will never be coming and going from our project, because that is a left turn lane for folks to head towards our project and then turn left and go a different direction. Again, just emphasizing that this is how we're addressing existing conditions through private development and the transportation improvements that projects like this bring. We're also addressing an internal road realignment, building a whole new bridge. This is a section of street that neighbors brought up as a concern for safety with accidents in the area. We are literally building a new bridge next to that street, redesigning it to have a safer configuration. Timeline-wise, I just want to emphasize this has been a very involved process with 3 formal neighborhood meetings, multiple separate meetings with individuals, as well as 4 formal submittals, 2 rounds of planning commission to earn our recommendation of approval. So we think that the rezoning and its conditions really set a high bar for development in this area, but we recognize the bigger discussion that council's been having on annexation, and we've done everything we can as a developer and an applicant to address that with this project. Again, we're revenue positive from year 1 through year 10. And we think, every decision, a no to one project is a yes to another project. If we wanted to go the Wake County route, I think that's a really bad outcome here. One, we're consistent with the city's future land use map, which calls for greater residential density. 2, we have all of our voluntary conditions that we're offering. 3, Raleigh has transportation plan roads that don't get built if it's in Wake County, or at least they're not required. I think most importantly is that more efficient land use pattern where we're getting far more houses on this site, smaller lot sizes. It leads to greater efficiency, greater housing stock, lower prices. Enhanced stormwater controls, again, beyond what the Wake County would require. And I know that when we look at the outskirts and we look at vehicle-dominated areas, there's a concern about walkability, but let's acknowledge that every single Wake County subdivision is unwalkable, and streets don't require sidewalks. We are building sidewalks and bike lanes within this community and connections throughout that create walkability in a totally unwalkable area. In my last 7 seconds, I'll just point to the financial investment that this developer would have through road improvements, sewer improvements, and all sorts of other improvements that provide future capacity to benefit the city. With that, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you.
Hey, can you go to the slide with the aerial of the larger area with the traffic improvements?
I will do my best to go back.
The arrows. This one. So just to orient my colleagues, particularly those who served in the last term too, in that larger oval toward the left, that green plus sign, that is where we've done all those, where we did those delayed annexations. And so the Publix is going in on that corner. There are apartments going in and townhomes like all around that intersection. And those are areas that have also contributed as future fire fund, have had delayed annexation. So I just want to kind of orient folks who have heard me hammer on about this region for the last several years. So anyway, there's that. I have a lot to say, but no particular questions, so I'll pass the mic if there are.
Yep. Councilor Branch and then Councilor Harrison.
Thank you. Couple questions. I'm going to start with probably, I think, the easiest first. Pump station. I know historically our staff does not like pump stations because of maintenance and then this thing called odor that tends to come from pump stations. So has this been vetted with our staff as far as the need for an actual pump station instead of gravity?
So I know that there are discussions as late as last week as far as what infrastructure would be required, and that I think there's some agreement and some understanding as to the scope, which would require increased capacity for future development, but I may lean to others that could answer that with more specifics if you need them.
Yeah, I just want to just get an idea of what's needed, and that may be a staff question as well, as far as if they've had a chance to look at this and what's needed as far as a pump station versus going with gravity flow.
Councilmember Branch, so far the discussions have been very preliminary at this design stage. We always look for ways to avoid a pumping station. My understanding at this point, it would include a pumping station unless we could find some other circuitous route down to Harris Creek. I think we've talked about maybe some improvements in Harris Creek to support the development, but the details of that have not been fully vetted. But we are always looking for opportunities to avoid pump stations.
Okay, that's what my understanding.
Yes, sir.
So I just wanted to make sure that was out there. Definitely there'll be more conversation. The other thing I want to talk about was the fire station. Let me ask you this question. What's your time frame, or what's the time frame for the development of this project?
I've got a slide that came later on the build-out, but I mean, it's several years out. As the city knows, there are a number of approvals that take time after this, but I think we're looking build-out taking out all the way out towards 2030 and beyond for this project.
Okay, and I asked because obviously you offered, because this is the first time I'm talking to you about this case, you offered $50,000 towards a fire station equipment. That might buy some boots. So I just want to just get a better understanding of whatever support you're looking to offer towards the fire station and the project. Also, the reason why I asked about your time frame is because we have a fire study that's coming before us this spring. So what I'm thinking is, and I hadn't talked to other counselors yet about this, at some point, maybe we need to get the fire study information first. That way we have a better understanding of what commitment they're wanting to volunteer. Because like I said, this is my first conversation with them. Hadn't talked to them prior to, and I've never asked for any commitment towards the fire station. But I just know based on the conversation we've had, we're trying to figure out location of a fire station, and we know costs are going up. They probably went up another $1 million while we're sitting here. So I just want to kind of put that out there, and that's why I asked what's your time frame for the approval of this, knowing that probably April or May, we're going to get our fire study, and our fire study may say it doesn't work on the locations that you're providing.
Yeah, and I guess I misunderstood the question when I said 2030 for timeline for approval. I'm thinking construction build out. I mean, obviously, we've been working on this for 2 years. Rezoning came after that. And, we had kind of waited for various studies to take place, and we're hearing that they continue on. So we prefer not to just keep kicking the can down the road. However, it's a comment that really the monetary component hadn't come up. What we did was try to look at what other projects did and meet that requirement.
Oh, okay.
But we're open to other ways to look at it. We don't have something quantifiable other than the precedential cases.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Councilor Harrison.
Yeah, so this is going to be a question about some of the parks, and I just want to tee up Stephen Bentley. I'm going to ask a couple things to you in a moment, but I just wonder if you could first talk about the pocket parks that you're proposing. I believe each pocket park is required to be 10,000 square feet. I'm not sure what you're thinking, but also there was this potential parkland dedication, and I know we've had other properties, in East, what became East Raleigh, where there has been a potential dedication of parkland, but I'm just trying to better understand what the potential is here, what's the acreage, whether Parks has an interest in this, because no matter what, if we take land, then we have to manage it, and we have to deal with it, and it's a great asset, but also it can have its own cost.
Sure. So for the pocket park component, the commitment is 10,000 square feet in the zoning condition with certain components that go into it. We've internally looked at that since receiving feedback about parks in recent days, and we can certainly increase that if needed. We think that there's more potential, and so, we put, again, we had received some sample conditions from another case. That was what Parks and Rec recommended as a condition, so we matched that and hadn't looked at it again until recently. So certainly something that we can take a closer look at. For other council members, the question about parkland covers that area right there. So we went as far as to meet with City Parks and Recreation staff, and we had a draft zoning condition. Lennar, as the developer here, is willing and intends, if this project proceeds, to dedicate that land to the City of Raleigh for a future park. And that point actually connects to a future City of Raleigh park. So it makes a lot of sense. We couldn't get the condition across because one of the property owners, all of his land is encompassed in that. And his response to us, which I think is very reasonable, is, okay, I think it's great that this could be used as a park, but if you're unable to close on it, I've just given away all of my land with nothing to show for it. Lennar can't close on the project until after the rezoning, so it put us in a little bind. So we are willing, ready, able, want to dedicate that. We met with Parks and Rec and understand that it's something they desire. Unfortunately, we can't make it a zoning condition, but we can give you all the assurances that our team that's a frequent flyer in the city is able to.
And could we hear from Stephen on that? I'm just curious, again, to understand if this is potentially desirable for parks and, any concerns that you might have.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. Stephen Bent with Raleigh Parks. Our staff did discuss it with the proposed team. One of the things we look at as a phase one Is it flat? People will like to give us wetlands. So we don't want to inherit something that doesn't have a true public benefit. And if it's already contributing environmentally, let the property owners take care of it. So open dialogue. But yeah, we're completely open to it, but we want a little bit, to know a little bit more what value it would contribute to the park system besides something we have to stop and mow once a month.
Yeah, are you aware, is it wetlands or anything else?
There are some, there's some blue, like creeks in the rear, but we actually studied to see what was feasible, and it looked like you could fit a couple of ball fields and parking to serve it as well. It's about a 12-acre site, so it is usable.
Okay. I mean, and I love wetlands, but yeah, I want to keep those there. Okay, yeah, those are my questions, and I appreciate the consideration for additional potential pocket parks or thinking about this, just the acreage, because 10,000 square feet is, I don't know, quarter acre, half acre, something like that. It's not much out of 200 and what have we got, 30 acres. But I really like the open space dedication. I like the density, the way that you have the plan with all of that open space requirement. I do think that is a smarter land use pattern than what we might otherwise see. So that I am appreciative of. Also, I like your positive fiscal analysis over the 10 years. I recognize we don't know what it's going to look like past that, but that was something I was looking at.
Do we have any more questions for Mr. Marsh? Okay. And I will close the petition annexation hearing.
Did you have a question?
Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and open for the rezoning hearing, unless there's any, okay. So open the public hearing on rezoning Z1224, same site. Again, we have Collier Marsh and then Travis Fluitt in support.
Travis is our traffic engineer, so we're happy to answer any
Okay.
more questions.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right. We will close the rezoning case for Z1224.
Yeah, so I just want to say, like, I don't know where all the votes will lie, but I want to acknowledge this is like a deeply imperfect situation. We just had a large conversation at our retreat about the cost of growth and the impacts of it, and like our colleagues, our predecessors in 2005 should probably never have approved the Rivertown development that is sort of creating the framework on which this case can even really be heard. I do this job with enough humility to think that in 20 years people might be saying the same thing about me, but given the fact that this case is here before us, I've been working with the applicant team for over a year to make sure that any development here positively serves the city. I think we were both operating under the idea that the NESA was proceeding. It is no longer, and we are pivoting. But I think when we weigh, I don't think there's any way to read the tea leaves that this land stays undeveloped or stays farmland. And so the question is, like, what development patterns are better? And Rivertown is going to get the infrastructure, as we heard. Rivertown is happening, and police will serve it, fire will serve it. We are on the hook for that. And so rather than allowing it to remain a completely isolated island, drawing it into the city a little bit by making it a peninsula rather than an island, I do think is a better of imperfect scenarios. I think the 40% open space with 30% of that being undisturbed, internal traffic calming, the wider than average greenway easement, and then the traffic improvements that are going to be happening out here. These are all DOT roads. I drive them every day. This is very much in my 3 times a week area of town. And these are on the bottom of DOT's list. These are traffic improvements that are badly needed in this area already that would otherwise not be occurring for another 15 years if we wait for them to appear on the STIP. And so I think there is sort of as much public benefit as we could hope given the sort of imperfect circumstances. So with all that preamble, I move to approve the annexation of the AX 0924.
Second, I just want to add briefly, that in an isolated context, this would be the exact type of development that I do not want us to see in the city of Raleigh. But we can't look at things siloed. And to Councilmember Patton's point, council members 20 years prior to our tenure did approve an annexation that created an island with the, what is it, Rivertown. I keep wanting to say Old Town, but that's a whole nother one. Rivertown. Knowing that that does create this to be a contiguous annexation. I do like the density, the ability to have townhomes, the open space and parks and the traffic calming, the commitment to our fire department, though the scope and size of it we could argue about how impactful that will be. And so for all of those reasons, I will be voting yes. And I also wanted to add that I really enjoy this discussion we're having that we've sort of daylighted now, starting at our retreat, about how does growth pay for itself, where does density make sense. And we have to remember that every time a case comes to us and there's concerns about height or scale, anytime we're taking stories off of projects or voting down towers downtown, that has to be made up for somewhere else. And so if we are saying as a body that we do not want to see more of these sprawling developments, we have to be willing to back it up with a willingness to allow development to occur in our urban cores and in areas of existing employment and retail. And that's what I would like to see. And so I hope that's where this discussion will take us long term. And I also want to note that I appreciate our planning director bringing to us a new process for these annexations that will allow us to help better intercept or direct these cases before they get this far along. So with that said, I'll be voting yes. And I don't remember if I seconded the motion or not, but I think I did second.
Before I recognize others, I want to say I was on this council in 2005, but I got off in January. Okay. I did not vote for this.
You're not culpable.
Just want it for the record. I think Councilor Branch and then Silver.
Yeah, I have my concerns here, but I do understand the impact. And the developer that's doing this project actually happened to be the ones who's built pretty much half of Old Town in Lennar. So I know the product they're putting down is good and impactful and will definitely serve the community well. But, you know, as we look at the city and as we're growing, let's just continue to have these conversations and let's talk about fire and the support. We had these conversations when we talked about projects down in my district, and we kind of slowed some things down there, which I think was the right thing to do. But we also, like Councilor Lambert Melton said, we either grow up or we grow out. And that's something that we really have to keep in mind because we can't make decisions in silos. So I will support this as we move it forward. But I definitely wanted to highlight the pump station, the fire station. We have your conditions, but I know you'll be good neighbors.
All right, Councilor Silver.
Well, Mayor, I know you left just in time. I was planning director when Rivertown was the annexation and rezoning was approved. I had recommended at the time that we not do it. It did go forward. I thought it would take some time. I didn't think it would take 18 years and counting. First, let me commend the applicant for really providing a very complete, compelling case for developing the area. But I also want to commend both the city manager for having this conversation about annexation at the retreat, and for the planning department, particular planning director, for really fast-tracking, because we were talking about the Northeast Special Study Area, recognizing that that priority areas need to be identified. I am struggling, I guess as a planner, that the site, as it's stated in terms of inconsistency, is that the site is within the Northeast Special Study Area, and the comprehensive plan recommends that the completion of that study before major rezoning or annexation decisions occur within the study area boundary. I believe in predictability and certainty. To me, that was a very clear message. Because I believe of Rivertown, I think we've all agreed, we're now seeing this contiguous annexation as a result of Rivertown. I do believe we have to really plan for orderly growth. There are many opportunities within our existing ETJ for growing, but I have to commend everyone across the board. There are great attributes to this project, and so it disheartens me, but I have to go with what I believe based on my planning principles, but I will not be supporting this case.
Councilor Jones.
Thank you, everyone, especially the applicants. We had an amazing conversation, and I really appreciate the stuff that you added to your presentation tonight to address those concerns, and that was that 10-year fiscal analysis that Councilor Harrison had brought up, so I really do appreciate that. For me, I'm similarly struggling, like Councilor Silver, because of the conversation that we had with staff, and we have, as we discussed on our call earlier, we have multiple departments who are concerned with this, and so for me, I don't know that I can go against the 5, I think, departments that did not go through with approving or suggesting this case. So for me, that is nothing to do. I think it's an amazing development. I think all of your arguments as opposed to having it as a county land makes sense, but our professional staff have noted their concerns both at the council retreat and in this case, and so for me, I will not be supporting this case either.
Any other comments? If not, all in favor of the motion, aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Right, so it's a 6-2 vote. And then we have the zoning case.
That's right. So I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated March 4th, 2025, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion on that? If not, all in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so another 6-2 vote. Thank you. All right. We now move on to Z3224, which is 4020 Sumner Boulevard at the intersection of Sumner and Wake Hills Lane, and Ms. Rackow's back.
Yeah, so Z3224, request to rezone one property, 4020 Sumner Boulevard. It's just under 2 acres in size, currently zoned commercial mixed use, 4 stories, conditional use. Requesting commercial mixed use, 5 stories, conditional use. So context, this is in North Raleigh, near the Triangle Town Center area. You can see a mix of undeveloped and developed, and sort of in progress developing, mix of commercial and residential. And then you can see on the site, there's been some grading activity, but undeveloped site. There are 4 proposed conditions. The first prohibits some uses normally allowed in CX, and then 2, 3, and 4 pertain to the relationship between the building and the street, so applying a build-to range and percentage along the Sumner Boulevard frontage, prohibiting parking between the Sumner Boulevard right-of-way and principal building, and then requiring at least one building entrance facing Sumner Boulevard. So the big picture here is a relatively small change. It's the same base district. It's increasing the maximum height by 1 story. So a sort of moderate increase all around. Future land use map designation is community mixed use. The requested district is consistent with that. There are a number of urban form map designations on the site. The 3 of those conditions do mimic urban frontage for one of the street's frontages on Sumner Boulevard, but it would not apply to the other frontage, and so inconsistent with the urban form designation for that reason. But consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. Consistent policies here are touching on a number of topics, including the transit service to this area. Inconsistent policies are really about that frontage topic, and then response time standards, which we see in a few places in the city. And the Planning Commission recommended unanimously for approval. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Great. Do we have questions? Okay, I will open the public hearing on 4020 Sumner Boulevard, and we had 2 folks signed up in support, Worth Mills and then Kamal Patel.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council, Worth Mills with Longleaf Law Partners here on behalf of the property owner and the applicant. Kamal Patel with the ownership group is here as well. This is a rezoning to allow for an additional story of height to go to CX5 conditional use to facilitate a 5-story hotel. Hannah did a great job with the presentation, and I'll note that the request is consistent with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan. I do want to touch on the urban form map and why we are considered inconsistent with that policy guidance. So the one thing that I will note is Wake Hills Lane is a private street. It was abandoned back in 2019, I believe, and the last pieces of that right-of-way were abandoned via plat in 2023. So Wake Hills Lane, not a public right-of-way. If we applied a straight frontage designation to this rezoning, there would not be any build-to requirements or any sort of frontage requirements associated with Wake Hills Lane. When the city abandoned Wake Hills Lane in 2019, they did not amend the urban form map to match this shift in public right-of-way. So you see the city replaced Wake Hills Lane with Triangle Ridge Road just to our west, but the Main Street designation on the urban form map remained static. And so therein lies the issues with us being able to meet the recommendations of the urban form map. But again, our conditions strive to create a frontage along Sunder Boulevard. As Hannah mentioned, we have a custom build-to range that's fairly similar to the urban limited requirements, and we've prohibited parking and vehicular surface area between a new building and the right-of-way. Here's a look at proposed site layout. You can see that the building is close to Sunder Boulevard. It is close to Wake Hills Lane as well. There are some existing easements that prevent us from putting the building even closer to that intersection, but I think, as you can see here, the expected footprint does create a more urban and more walkable environment for people in this area. So just to provide a summary, our request is consistent with the future land use map, the comprehensive plan. Our zoning conditions strive to create consistencies with the urban form map, and we think the request is reasonable and in the public interest. Happy to answer any questions that you have and appreciate the time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Mills? Councilor Patton.
Hey, Worth, I got questions for you. So this stated the intended use is going to be for a hotel. It's right across the street from Triangle Town Center. So I think there's a hope that there will be a lot of pedestrian activity. People will be patrons of the hotel and they'll walk over to Triangle Town Center and eat dinner or whatever. When we were working on this case, there was discussion about pedestrian improvements, and I know you answered, but I have forgotten. Can you remind me what is was discussed?
So we will have, and I think maybe Hannah's photos showed it better, there is existing sidewalk along Sunder Boulevard today. I think our conversations were related to a pedestrian crossing across Sunder Boulevard. When we had initially spoken about that some months ago, I was unaware that there is an existing protected pedestrian crossing here, right at our shared boundary line with the apartments to our east. That crossing has the pedestrian refuge island, and it leads directly to that sidewalk internal to the shopping center north of Sunder Boulevard. And so our hope, our intention is that the existing crosswalk leading across Sumner will serve as a way for folks to safely get across Sumner. It's not a very far walk from where our proposed entrance is right here. So from there, folks would just have to walk this short distance and then cross Sumner Boulevard.
That's right. Thank you for that reminder. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I appreciate the addition of the non-vehicular oriented uses, or just around the corner from here, there's some nuisance behaviors that we work on from time to time. So I appreciate, while I know you have an intended use, sometimes I am trying to think of what would happen if your project doesn't come to fruition, so I appreciate that. So if my colleagues don't, I'm happy to support at the appropriate time if there's no other questions from my colleagues.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Okay. So I will close the hearing on Z3224.
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated March 4th, 2025, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. So that is unanimous. Thank you. All right, next we have rezoning Z3624, 9000 and 9004 Litchford Road.
Yeah, so this is a request to rezone two properties, a little under 2 3/4 acres in size. They're currently zoned R1 and requesting R10 conditional use. So locating this site, this is off of Litchford Road, just south of the intersection with Falls of Neuse Road. A mix of commercial uses along Falls of Neuse Road, and then several different scales of residential in the area. Views of the site. And then a summary of proposed conditions. There's one prohibiting the cemetery use and one capping the total number of dwelling units to no more than 40. So the picture here from a rather large lot residential district with larger setbacks to a residential district that allows smaller units, a full slate of building types allowed, and smaller setbacks, and so an increase in overall residential entitlement. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan. That includes the future land use map designation of moderate scale residential. And then consistent policies here touching on a number of topics, including the increase in housing entitlement. And there were no inconsistent policies noted for this case. And then finally, the Planning Commission did recommend approval unanimously. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions?
I'm getting a lot of mic time tonight. So many cases. One thing I heard at the community meetings a lot was around traffic on this road. Do you have traffic information in terms of what Litchford Road was built to carry and what it does carry vehicle trips per day? I think is the.
I don't know off the top of my head. I might ask transportation staff to come help answer that. Thanks.
Hello, Carter Robertson with Transportation. Yeah, this section of Litchford, the average daily traffic is around 13,000 vehicles per day. And this is in line with what our comprehensive plan lays out for 3-lane streets. That's what Litchford is right now. So those type of streets can handle from 8,000 to 20,000 vehicles per day. So right in line there.
Got it. So under capacity or within capacity?
Yes.
Excellent. And how is that in line? You know, my residents will ask, like, what will happen when you add all these new residents? Do you have the historical data, like how we're tracking and how we might continue to track?
The growth for this section of Litchford over the past 20 years has been very slow. I believe the most recent number we had was around 11,000 in 2003. So pretty slow growth. And if you keep that over the next 25 years, still would be at or near capacity.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. All right. If there's no further questions, I will open the hearing on Z3624. And we had 2 individuals signed up, Jennifer Ashton and then Michael Birch.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jennifer Ashton, Longleaf Law Partners, and Michael Birch is my colleague, so I'll be the only one talking tonight. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant GLT Properties. That is actually the Taylor family. They have owned 9,000 Litchford Drive since 1967. That was their grandmother's property for a very long time. A lot of the neighbors at the neighborhood meeting actually knew Betty Taylor. She's still with us, she's just not living there anymore due to age. And then they acquired 9004 Litchford Drive in 2021. And they are looking to do 40 townhome units on this site, a for-sale product. The nice thing about the Taylor family is they have a connection to the community, but they're also going to be the developers and the builders of these units. They have a construction company as well. So they're going to be soup to nuts from development all the way through sales for these units. So they have a very community invested interest in making sure this product is a good thing for the community. So as Hannah mentioned, the property is about 2.715 acres. Currently there are 2 single-family homes on it. We have frontage along Litchford Road. The current zoning is R1. We do have that future land use designation of moderate scale residential, and we're proposing to go to R10 with conditions. Just to give you all kind of a layout, this is a really, what I consider a unique site in North Raleigh. It is close in proximity to a good amount of commercial. I'll go more into depth in that in a moment. But there is easy access to 540. The Wake Med North Campus is right there to the north on Durant Road. And then we also have Durant Middle School that is pretty close as well. So again, kind of a unique situation, just having so much in close proximity to this site for a North Raleigh townhome development. Just to give you a little more information on the commercial that is within walking distance of this site, we have 2 grocery stores, which is very, very unique. We have a Sprouts grocery store, and then to the north of us at Harris, there's a Harris Teeter as well. And then there's a good amount of restaurants and retail around us too. On our side of Litchford, we are adjacent to 2 apartment complexes. One is the Muirfield Village Apartments, closer to Falls of Neuse, and then Brookfield, which is a little more to our southeast. The current zoning is that R1, but you'll see to the north those Muirfield Apartments, they're currently zoned R10, and then the Brookfield Apartments to our southeast are R6. The future land use designation for this area is that moderate scale residential. This is allowing for those missing middle housing types like the townhome units. You'll notice just from this map, a lot of this area is single family. So we would be providing alternative housing choices for folks coming in that maybe don't want to be in a single family or can't afford a single family. And R10 is a corresponding district to this land use designation, so we are consistent there. Urban form map, there is no urban form for Litchford, but I did want to talk a little bit about Falls of Neuse. As Councilmember Patton had mentioned, there was a lot of concern from neighbors at the neighborhood meetings about traffic in this area. And I just want to point out, Falls of Neuse right now is undergoing a major widening project, so that may be adding to these concerns about the perception of really bad traffic. That project is supposed to be completed in September of this year. Just to give you a frame of reference on when we would even be looking to go vertical for this project, it probably won't be till the early part of 2026. So even if the Falls of Neuse project was delayed a little bit, it should be complete by the time we break ground. The street plan for Litchford, and I'll talk a little bit more in a minute about Councilmember Patton's question about traffic. Litchford Road currently is a 2-lane road with a turn lane in the middle of it. It is slated to eventually go to an avenue 4-lane divided, and we will be contributing a lot of improvements along our frontage, such as 6-foot sidewalks, eventually 5-foot bike lanes, and there'll be protected bike lanes along our frontage to make up that street cross-section. There were some concerns from neighbors about this perception that Litchford was somehow over capacity. However, the traffic data shows that's just not the case. As was mentioned earlier, Litchford is around about 3,000 vehicles per day on trips, and it has the capacity to be at 20,000 per day per trips. Once Litchford Road is eventually widened to that 4-lane divided, it can be up to 35,000 vehicles per day. But based on the current trends of traffic on that road, it has been a very slow growth on that road for capacity. And as was mentioned, it probably won't be nearing capacity until about 2050. So Our little 40 townhome project is not going to be significantly impacting this. We're only adding 21 AM peak hour trips and 25 PM peak hour trips. This is just showing you kind of what that new street cross-section is going to look like with those wide sidewalks and protected bike lanes. Topography, just wanted to touch on this briefly. There were some comments from neighbors in the Woodstone community. They were concerned based on some past flooding situations they had at their site. We explained to them that just based on the topography of our two lots, there's a 16-foot grade change from Litchford Road down to the rear of our site, so water is going to be flowing away from Woodstone. So our development is not going to be impacting them from a stormwater perspective. As Hannah mentioned, we do have a condition where we are capping our residential density to 40 dwelling units. This was in direct response to neighbor comments that they wanted to limit density. 40 in our mind is what could actually be built on site and still comply with all of the city regulations. I think staff had estimated it could be 48 units, but our development team thought 40 was probably more realistic. And we are consistent with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan overall, and we did receive that unanimous recommendation of approval from Planning Commission, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you all have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Questions for Ms. Ashton? Nope. Okay. I will close the hearing for Z3624, and do we have a motion or discussion?
Yeah, I'll say that I was appreciative that during the community meetings, it surfaced some things that were not for the applicant to attend to, but for the city to attend to. And if you interact with the residents before I do, you can let them know they're on it, the line of sight issues and some of the sidewalk issues and stuff. And to sort of, as a palate cleanser to all the sprawl, here we have an in-town development on a road that's under capacity, nice and walking distance to 2 grocery stores, so we can balance the scales back a little bit. I will also tell transit staff, I think it would be great if the Route 2 ran all the way up to Wake Med North, which would then also put transit access near this new development. So just flagging that. But with all that, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated March 4th, 2025, contained in the agenda materials to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Second.
Right. All in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right. The Boy Scouts are long gone. I know we're making progress, though. We're going to leave District B and go to District D for Z3724, and Councilor Silver has a just disclosure.
Yes. I learned a few hours ago that the company I work for, McAdams, is on a technical team, consultants for this project. I was not aware of it. And so everyone knows I'm no longer a shareholder in the company, and speaking to the city attorney, I have no conflict on this case. I will be voting on this matter.
Okay. With that, we will turn it over to Mr. Eckhoff.
Sure, yeah. So rezoning request Z3724, one property, 326 Chapin Oak Road, a little over 6 acres in size. It is currently zoned industrial mixed use, 3 stories, parking limited with the transit overlay district. They're requesting commercial mixed use, 5 stories with conditions, and the TOD. So situating ourselves, this is in South Raleigh at the intersection of South Wilmington Street and Chapin Oak Road, an undeveloped property. It is owned by Wake County, but the applicant in this case is a potential developer. You see a mix of uses in this area, commercial on the west side of South Wilmington Street to supermarkets and additional commercial, several schools located along Chapin Oak Road, other light industrial uses farther east, and then funeral home and cemetery to the north. I'll note that this is the southern BRT corridor, which will come right down this way and be with a proposed station on the other side of South Wilmington Street on Chapin Oak Road. So some views of the site. You can see, as I mentioned, undeveloped, largely forested. There are two proposed conditions. One sets limits to number of residential units, no more than 200, and caps commercial uses to no more than 12,000 square feet. And then there are a list of prohibited land uses on the site. So big picture, both mixed-use districts, they're maintaining the TOD overlay. It's actually a slight decrease in units, staying roughly the same, and then a decrease in the commercial entitlement, and not in this table would be a definite decrease in industrial uses permitted in IX. So the site is designated on the future land use map, business and commercial services, which would normally point towards current zoning, the IX district. The requested CX allows more residential than is really envisioned in the business and commercial services. So it's inconsistent with the future land use map designation. There are a number of urban form map designations for this site being so close to a future BRT site. No urban frontage on the site, but the inclusion of the TOD does apply urban frontage, and so that is consistent with the urban form guidance. So consistent overall with the comprehensive plan, consistent policies. You can see there's 3 pages of these, touch on policies around transit, capitalizing on transit access, managing commercial development impacts, the mix of uses that would still be permitted, encouraging nodal development, as well as housing variety, maintaining that on the site. And then also some additional policies related to rezoning away from industrial in certain areas. Inconsistent policy that is cited is really only the future land use map designation. And on that note, approval of the request because of that inconsistency would be a de facto amendment to the future land use map, in this case to community mixed use. So it would turn red on the map. And then finally, the Planning Commission recommended approval 5-0. There were 2 members that were recused from that vote. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, questions? Okay, if not, I will open the public hearing on Z3724. Welcome. And we have Jamie Schwedler, and then we also have, 5 other speakers who can split the 8 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Cowell and members of the council. I'm Jamie Schwedler with Parker Poe. My team is here with me and is available to answer questions. And I'm joined by my colleague, Walker Abbott, as well as our other team members, including Michael Vamprin, Adam Pike, and Will Letchworth, all here on behalf of the applicant, Raleigh Community Partners. This rezoning is a request to accommodate housing and appropriate scaled commercial along a corridor that has increased in its commercial activity and its planning for transportation and infrastructure and is ripe for the time to place housing in this area. It's also a special type of project because it's a unique public-private partnership that's formed in this area along those transit corridors on land that is deed restricted for affordable housing. So this went through a RFP proposal, and the selected applicant, who will explain the partnership in just a moment, is subject to not only that deed restriction for affordable housing, which is enforceable by the county as this land is owned by Wake County, but they're also subject to that RFP process and making sure that they deliver on those. Ultimately, both processes are governed by the county, and so we did not add additional affordable housing conditions that you've come to see from time to time by the city, but that's because those additional enforcement mechanisms exist elsewhere. And I'll turn it over briefly to Hunter Snellings, who will explain the Raleigh Community Partnership and some of the members who are here with us tonight.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. Hunter Snellings, VP Development with Harmony Housing Affordable Development. I'm one of 3 legs of the Raleigh Community Partner joint venture. Also joined tonight by James Monty Montague with F7 Development, as well as Bob Tangen with Gilbane Development. Again, the 3 make up Raleigh Community Partners. Just excited about the opportunity to work with Wake County on redevelopment of this site for affordable housing. Hope to have your support tonight. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Hannah did a great job going through the site overview, and I think it's notable just to see that it's directly south of Montlawn Cemetery and in the vicinity of where that BRT line is planned to be down Wilmington Street. It's also just roughly 1 mile south of both 40 and the edge of downtown Raleigh, in an area that has largely been industrial and was zoned such in 2016, but has changed somewhat over time. And that's shown here in the future land use map on the left side of the screen, where we see the purple designation of the business and commercial services, roughly aligns with the majority of that area that was industrial at the time and was translated in that mapping in 2013 to 2016. But the commercial in the red is largely designated the community mixed use, and that's largely how it has developed since that time. Now, since then, because of the TOD overlay and because the investments in BRT, it begs even further compliance with the comprehensive plan because of where you want residents to be able to locate close to that line is really the impetus for that RFP and placing Wake Tech students in close proximity to the Wake Tech building, which is just to the south of us there on Chapin Oak. In terms of the urban form map, there's several different policies that bring guidance there for where you want to invest in transportation and infrastructure. We're within the transit station area, the frequent transit area, the BRT area, and a mixed-use center. So all guidance that says this is where we want new residents, as well as providing that appropriate scaled commercial that we've included in our conditions. The small area plan in this area is a Southern Gateway area plan. You may remember this from the South Wilmington rezoning that we had several years ago. It's envisioned as that kind of Southern Gateway into town and has a policy APSG4 that you'll see on the screen that uniquely places this type of project within that policy guidance because it envisions coordinating development with transit investment through public-private partnerships, which is exactly what we've delivered here. The rezoning request as such is complying with all of those policies from the comprehensive plan and taking this to a CX5 CU with TOD. The CX permits the residential to go on the ground floor where it wouldn't otherwise in the existing zoning. The 5 stories is in line with your height guidance between 2 and 12 stories because this area is in proximity to that BRT station and is eligible for additional height. The CX would update the flume to the commercial mixed use, as Hannah explained, but because, as you can see on the screen, that's largely consistent with not only the commercial designations right across the street, but also in the proximity of where you're going to have a new station area and is where we want more commercial uses to be as the city transitions from that industrial to the east. The TOD prohibits certain uses and automatically applies here, but we've included several others in our conditions, which I'll go to in just a second. I wanted to point out why we didn't add the urban or the specific frontage that will automatically apply through the TOD, but the site does have some significant site constraints in that 70-foot transition line easement that goes straight through the corner of the site. Makes it a bit difficult to fit Build 2, and we're trying to avoid any delays so that the project can go forward and obtain its financing for the affordable housing. The zoning conditions Hannah went through, we capped ourselves at 200 units and 12,000 square feet to kind of establish where we think the yield will go and the appropriately scaled commercial uses that could go on the site. And then we included several additional uses that would otherwise be permitted under CX to be more consistent and to address some of the concerns that were raised in our community meetings. And so with that, we're largely consistent with the comprehensive plan. Those policies are all noted in page 6 and page 9 of the staff report. The last one I'll note is just policy LU 11.4, which supports rezoning and development of industrial areas, specifically in sites immediately and adjacent to planned transit station, which of course is what we're doing here. With that, we received unanimous approval from the Planning Commission. We're very much looking forward to move this case forward and hope we have your support tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We have, yes.
Just saying this as a matter of sense of humor. I'm noticing cemeteries as this prohibited use. Is that just a trend? I'm sorry, I was just saying that because it's literally next to a cemetery.
I thought the taxidermy was interesting.
Yeah.
No taxidermy.
I think the public will be entertained by all these prohibitive uses, but I just noticed this case and the other case had cemeteries as prohibited uses. But I don't have any questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Jamie, could you speak to the affordable housing planned, at what levels? Is this every unit that's going to be there, for how long, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I'll speak to it generally, and then Hunter can provide. It's a pretty complex formula, but the deed restriction on the land is for all of the units to be affordable. It doesn't define what that is, and so the RFP did go through that process, and Hunter can explain a little bit about that and why that's more appropriately left in the RFP than a zoning condition.
It'll be 100% affordable, range of incomes from 30% area median income up to 80%. So a mix of incomes in the development. I didn't point out, but I think Jamie mentioned as well that there'll be a soft set aside as well for Wake Tech students that are income eligible households. 30% of the units will be set aside for those folks.
Great. And I'm prepared to make a motion.
Can you go to the slide about the transmission lines? I'm assuming these are overhead transmission lines. I just want to go back just to see that slide, and I'm assuming that is, you will not be able to develop it to that location. Are these very large transmission? I don't know what's in this particular area.
I believe they're overhead, and it's typical with the Duke easements that you're not allowed to put structures, so you could traverse it with maybe a driveway or certain low-lying shrubs and trees, but you can't place buildings typically within
Are these
that.
larger metal structures or something that's not at that large scale?
I'm not sure that there's any metal structures on the site. I think it's just a span.
It's just an easement?
It's a span.
It's just an easement at this point?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
It still has those restrictions of where you can't build.
Do you have to close the hearing? Or I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. Closing the hearing for Z3724, and I will.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated March 4th, 2025, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action. This approval is also deemed an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
All right, any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. All right, so that's unanimous. Thank you. All right, final case of the evening is District C, rezoning Z4024 2340 Compassionate Drive, and we have Ms. Rakow again.
Good evening. Yes, this is a rezoning request for one parcel, 10 acres in size, currently zoned R6 with the Special Highway Overlay District 1. They're requesting removal of the overlay and rezoning to residential mixed use, 4 stories, conditional use. So site context, this is Compassionate Drive off of Rock Quarry Road. Really mainly residential in this area, particularly north of Rock Quarry Road, southeast Raleigh Magnet High School to the south, and some additional commercial uses there. I want to point out that can't quite see on this aerial, Compassionate Drive is not a dedicated street, although the parcel is addressed and named off of it. To the north is the church specifically the I apologize, my notes got all. Sorry, to the north is the Compassionate Tabernacle of Faith Missionary Baptist Church, which also owns this property, although the applicant in this case, I believe, is the potential developer. So here are some views of the site. The top right corner shows Compassionate Drive. And then proposed conditions, there are 6 of them. The first prohibits some uses, includes all commercial uses that would be normally permitted in RX, and then a list of residential uses, including single and 2-unit living. Residential units would be limited to no more than 225 units total. The conditions also require dedication of at least 25% of the net site area as open space. There is a proposed condition specifying affordability requirements, a term of 30 years. And then a commitment to perform a signal warrant analysis at Compassionate Drive and Rock Quarry Road prior to the first certificate of occupancy. And then finally, a commitment to host a neighborhood meeting after the submittal of the first development plan. So existing versus proposed, there's a removal of the SHOD 1. This is going from a residential district to a mixed-use district, although all of the non-residential is prohibited per proposed conditions. The total number of units is also informed by the proposed conditions. The site is designated low-scale residential in the future land use map. The requested district establishes residential at a higher intensity than that designation envisioned, so it is inconsistent with the future land use map. But it is consistent with the comprehensive plan overall. Some consistent policies touching on managing commercial development impacts, housing variety, open space that's required through the developments, through the zoning conditions rather. And then the mix of housing that would still be allowed under the requested district. Inconsistent policies. This is really pointing towards how different the proposed development under this district would be to the surrounding area. And then there is the future land use map inconsistency and response time standards as well. So being inconsistent with the future land use map, approval would amend the map, in this case, to medium scale residential. And the Planning Commission recommended approval 5-2. The two opposing votes noted concerns with the proposed building height and potential stormwater implications to the neighboring properties. I should also mention that the recommendation for approval came with a recommendation to consider addressing the building height and stormwater issues that the Commission discussed. So with that, happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Excuse me. Can we have staff, and I've already briefly talked to Wayne, talk about stormwater in this area and the concerns that the neighbors have and what requirements any property or development must take in order addressing stormwater, and if there's anything else the city's doing outside of this project to address those stormwater concerns.
Sure, yeah, stormwater staff can address that.
Good evening. Ben Brown, Stormwater. And Wayne's right behind me, so if you want to hear from him too. So.
Good.
No, there are a couple complaints out here, and one structural flooding drainage complaint, which is key because that's going to kick in a UDO restriction that they will have to detain up to the 100-year storm for their stormwater runoff leaving the site. So, and the structural flooding in question is near the potential outfall of where this site would be outfalling their stormwater drainage, so it would obviously qualify and hit that UDO escalation there. So, but the others were more channel erosion, but there was one structural.
Is there anything that can be done to deal with the channel erosion?
Hopefully, holding back the runoff to that higher level will definitely help and keep those velocities down. So that's what.
Okay.
But just the channel erosion on their own wouldn't have kicked in the UDO protection. So.
Got it. But because of the known flooding in the area, we're requiring them to build to the 100-year stormwater. If there wasn't any flooding, what standard would they be building towards?
To the 2 and 10-year storm standard.
2 and 2 year. Okay.
And so, and we would hold them to the 100-year standard whether they rezone the property or not. If they developed it today as by right, then we would hold it to that as well.
Okay, so regardless when or if or however this property is developed, it must be built to the 100-year stormwater standards.
Correct.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay. Well, I will go ahead and open up the hearing for Z4024, and we have 10 people signed up in support with 8 minutes, and I know we have Pastor Michael Humphrey is one of them, and then I'm not sure, how y'all are dividing your time.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Amy Kraut. I'm an attorney at Smith Anderson. I'm here today on behalf of the applicant. We will be splitting our time. I'm going to reserve about a minute for Reverend Burgess. He is the pastor of Compassionate Tabernacle of Faith, who is the property owner here. So I'm here on behalf of Standard Communities. We do have the project and engineering team to help answer any questions that you have. We do really want to thank staff for their work on this project. We've been working with them since last June on several of the issues and concerns, and they've helped us get the request to where it is today. In terms of property location and zoning, staff already went over most of this. Just want to highlight that the church owns this two tracts totaling 20 acres. Standard Communities under contract to purchase this lower 10 acres highlighted in red. We are going from R6 to RX4. This is really for density and stories, but as you'll see in a moment, we've really restricted down the uses here to make it more consistent with the area. We understand that it's low density residential on the future land use map, but apartments can be appropriate in these areas, especially in areas of frequent transit, and we're right outside a frequent transit area and a transit emphasis corridor. And overall, it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the city's goals for affordable housing. This truly is an affordable housing partnership. Site selection for affordable housing, as you know, can be difficult. Just trying to cobble together enough land that's vacant or to make it work, or find something in a QTC district that's eligible for affordable housing funding. So here, partnerships between churches and developers are becoming more common, and that's what we have here today. Standard Communities, just a little bit of background, it's a trusted workforce affordable residential developer across the country. They have 190 communities and over 27,000 units. They have values, and those are that they act with kindness, they sweat the details, and they move with urgency. And I can tell you from experience, we've really sweat the details in this rezoning request. We've done a lot of legwork up to this point to make sure that it's consistent, and we've got good zoning conditions here that address some issues. The church was founded in 1988. They've been an active part of the Raleigh community, and they're supportive of this request and have been working with us hand in hand on it. I just want to briefly go over the 6 conditions, but the biggest one here is this is a rezoning to facilitate that missing middle housing. It's 100% affordable. It's built into the zoning conditions, and it'll be an average of 60% AMI. Examples of those missing middle workers are postal workers, school teachers, police officers, and social workers. If you want to look at the numbers, Raleigh's average annual income is $122,000. The 60% AMI level is about 67, 68, and the workers that we really target are in like the mid-50s. A rental rate for a 1-bedroom is about $1,275 under this affordable housing, and 2-bedroom is $1,550. So it's about 10 to 20% below kind of non-affordable market rate. Talked about just kind of limiting impact through use and layout. We heard concerns about the residential mixed use. We've taken out all commercial uses. This area isn't appropriate for commercial or retail. It's set back far from the road, and that really wasn't the purpose here. So we've taken all of those out. We've limited to 225, but based on LIHTC guidelines, the max is 200, so it'll be at that rate, if not a little under that. dedicated 25% open space. This is just a concept plan subject to change as we go through the affordable funding kind of process, but it does preserve that 25% open space through the conditions. Taking a look at the view, this is just kind of a height and mass rendering. These will look like traditional 3-story garden apartments. The reason for the 4 isn't for the height. We understand 4 stories allows 68 feet in height. These will cap out about 52.5, 55, which is closer to that 3-story. But there's some topography on the property that makes like a half basement apartment possible here, which is why we requested the 4 stories. One of the things that is really important to us is smart improvements to existing infrastructure. Standard Communities has committed a lot of time and resources to reviewing potential improvements to Compassionate Drive. It's a private road. You can see it's not really paved or developed right now, and access is essential. We have this here. We want to be cautious and sorry,
I was just going to give you a time check if we have Reverend Burgess here. Yep.
Yeah, I have 2 minutes and 40 seconds left. Yep, we're good. Yep. And I've reserved 1 minute for him. So we've talked about it, so we're good, but thank you. Yes, so Compassionate Drive, it's only 50-foot right-of-way. We've already talked to Raleigh Transportation about a design alternative that would potentially put a 2-lane in and out with a sidewalk on one side and buffering on each side. Also in talks with NCDOT about a traffic light at Compassionate Drive and Rock Quarry. That's really important here. Standard Community wants a traffic light. We've just got to go through NCDOT processes to get that. Finally, community engagement. We've committed to do another neighborhood meeting after rezoning before site plan approval. Want to touch briefly in my last minute about stormwater and height. There were the 2 Planning Commission concerns. Councilmember Branch asked stormwater about this. We do trigger the additional improvement requirements under the UDO, so we will be treating to a 100-year flood event. When we've taken a look at the numbers, really this means that we will have no impact or if potentially improve flooding in the surrounding areas. We are willing to kind of go back and look at potential additional conditions, but based on our conversations with stormwater, they don't really move the needle much beyond the additional requirements in the UDO. In terms of height, again, we're targeting 52.5 feet, but we're willing to restrict that further down if that is what the council needs for approval instead of that 58. So with that, I will turn it over to Reverend Burgess.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is James Burgess, and I am the pastor of Compassionate Tabernacle of Faith Baptist Church here in Raleigh. I am representing my congregation, but I have many others in the audience. If I could have them to stand real quickly. All right, thank you, thank you. Our church mission vision statement is intentionally connecting others to God's amazing grace. We attempt to do this by ministering and serving our surrounding communities. Our primary focus is on our youth and our families. We were not seeking to sell any of our almost 20 acres and have dismissed many suitors. Standard Communities' offer was different in that it proposed a project that complemented our church ministry vision. They have been most cooperative and have incorporated our expectations into their plans. So tonight, if you could give me, we stand firmly with Standard in partnership with a shared vision for the affordable housing for a very critical segment of our community that has come to be known as the missing middle. Thank you for your consideration of this rezoning request. Hopefully and prayerfully, another public-private partnership will emerge as the city of Raleigh seeks to address this growing need. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We now have a number of speakers in the opposition. There are 4 people signed up for 8 minutes total, so we'll go ahead and call up. We have Octavia Rainey, Keisha Lovelace, Greta Gill, and Virginia Talley.
Good evening. My name is Keisha Lovelace. I'm here with my mother, Naomi Lovelace, who resides at the property closest to this development at 2117 TD Street, Raleigh, in the Rockview subdivision. She has owned that property since 1973. I'm going to try to reserve my comments to 2 minutes because we have other speakers. However, I want to point out that we just had a very wonderful presentation about what the church and standard communities want to do. But during the 2 public meetings, neighborhood meetings with more than 80 people combined there, we asked for this information and never saw it. This is the first time many of these residents, and you see them nodding their heads, have seen this. And that is concerning because most of the property owners there in the Rockview subdivision have lived there for 50 to 60 years. The Granite Ridge subdivision has been there for about 30 years. We have a 50-year stormwater problem there. My father, who passed away in 2019, was a pack rat. I went through his old files. This is a letter from 1974 from the city of Raleigh, former city councilman Williams, writing to the city manager asking county engineering to go out and deal with the drainage problem in my mother's backyard. Nothing was done at that point in time. The second letter is from 2009 when the city entered into a contract to try to deal with the drainage problem. My parents' house is at the bottom of 2 hills. If you look at this property, it's like a bowl. When it rains, the water comes down into our home. Although they were not here because they're not within the notice of the hearing, Fulton Circle off of Southgate Drive, they have had issues where the rain has come in and it's like a waterfall coming into their backyard. There is a drainage issue, a stormwater issue in that area. When my parents built this house in 1973, they had to dig down until they got to dry land because there's water underneath our house, but put 2 cement poles, encased it in, and the foundation was built around that. And so what we have now, 35 years, 2009 is when the drainage issue with the water going down the hill. In 50 years, the water that is on the old golf course, this old historic black golf course, the first one in Wake County, it was the Tee-Off Golf Club. When it was built back there, it was water issues there. There's water that comes down through there. Granite Ridge subdivision, when it was built, changed that land and property. The church built dug a huge drainage ditch in the middle of that property to deal with the stormwater runoff. After the first public hearing in this matter, they filled it in. And so now when it rains, it's like a river flowing on that water. The apartments that they're talking about building will be built right where that water flows. And so where will it divert to? It's going to divert to my mother's house, possibly Ms. Davis's house, which is 2 houses up. Our neighbor's house, this is an old community that was built before Rock Quarry Road was paved. There's well water there. In between my house and the neighbor's house, there is a well. I believe Greta's house or the Williams house has well water. So when the stormwater runs off, it's going to contaminate or possibly disturb the well water that is there. Some of them have not connected to city water, is my understanding. So it's a huge water issue that was not addressed. When we went before the Planning Commission, there was a lot of flurry back and forth. We're now just hearing tonight about building to this 100-year standard. Our concerns were not addressed. The other issues, and I will leave it at that, one, it is completely landlocked. Compassionate Drive is not able to get 2-lane traffic in there. You saw in the city's report that it does not meet the national fire standards for fire response. There is no way for a fire truck to get in there. Frankly, my mother and I had a conversation. I don't know how they're going to build back there because there's no way to get back there. It's a very short street that the church uses, probably not even a tenth of a mile rather, to get into the property. It's almost like an alleyway. And so the road is not wide enough. We don't do oppose, and I believe the Granite Ridge neighbors also oppose only one sidewalk. We want 2 sidewalks. Southeast Raleigh High School is right there, less than 1/10 of a mile from my mother's home. What has happened over the years, when it was built in 1997, the kids would go through my parents' yard, go up Brenda Drive, and get to the high school. It is contemplated that they will travel up and down what will be Compassionate Drive. However, it needs 2 sidewalks. You're talking about school children walking across busy Rock Quarry Road. Traffic signal analysis, that is good, but you also have Coastal Creek Amphitheater down there. It does not meet the peak standards. When you look at AM, PM peak standards and that sort of thing, you have to take into consideration April through September when the concert series are going on, and traffic is backed up from the amphitheater down Rock Quarry Road onto the Beltline, and you cannot get in and out of any of those subdivisions. It's a blind spot leaving my mother's neighborhood where with increased traffic you will not be able to see. Talked about traffic, the character of the neighborhood. These are older houses, half-acre lots, all 2,000 square feet or more.
I'm just going to give you that we have 2 minutes and 30
All right,
seconds
and I'm going to stop,
left.
but I will
Yeah.
say this. This matter and this property is not the first time it has come before the Planning Commission and the City Council. When Preeminent Charter School was established in the late 1990s, it came before the City Council and the Planning Commission, and conditions were put onto this property. I don't see any of that there dealing with the character of the neighborhood and changing it from an area that within a mile of this are single-family detached homes. The only apartments are 1 level at most. I don't know what they call Fox Ridge now, but it's only 2 stories. If they are saying it's only going to be 52 feet, if you're inclined to do this, change the conditions. 200 is the max they can do, change the max to 200. If it's 52 feet that they're saying the max will be, change the condition to that. Our preference is that the zoning remain where it is and that a significant study be done to look at the stormwater issues there. It's been 50 years and it has not been addressed for any of the surrounding communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, do you have another speaker? Ms. Rainey.
Octavia Rainey. I do oppose the project because I think that not only is the stormwater important, but the traffic is awful. It is awful. I served on the Altel Pavilion Board with Dr. Alan Mass, and traffic was my baby. And the people couldn't even get through to go to their houses. It was awful. I think they need to move the Altel Pavilion out to Dick's property now. I think that it's time to move it. You haven't done nothing for the Altel Pavilion in 30 years. Time to move it. It's time to address the traffic. And I'm not talking about piecemealing the traffic. You have to address the traffic for all those neighborhoods. And that is not being done. I don't understand, and there's nothing to the church, but I don't understand how you could get this far without addressing the traffic. Pedestrian friendly? No, it's not being addressed. Bicycle lanes not being addressed. So I don't understand how we got this far with this project. Even with, like Keisha said, the stormwater is awful, but the traffic is terrible. You got all those schools out there now. You have built up out there now, but you're not doing anything for the older neighborhoods. You're not doing anything to preserve them. And I don't understand about this missing middle stuff. I don't understand it because you still need housing based upon 30% of your ability to pay. And I'm quite sure there's somebody in that church that needs 30%.
Y'all can have an extra 30 seconds if you want, because I know we went over with the other side. But
Just checking, are there 2 speakers that were?
Yeah.
Could we do a minute each for them and then give 2 minutes on the other side?
Yeah.
Good evening.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you, Mayor Cowell, and members of the City Council. My name is Greta Gill, 2400 Brenda Drive. I am in the Rockview subdivision. I also speak in opposition to the project. My primary concern is the traffic, the sentiments that have already been echoed. I took the opportunity just to drive around the area within a 3-mile radius of Compassionate Drive. I went past 19 different neighborhoods. Most of them depend on Rockwire Road to move into and out of the city. The other issue that is concerning is the safety for students at Southeast Raleigh High School. Since the school has been there have been sidewalks on one side of the street, but not on the side with Compassionate. So, and there are things that could have been done, like the signal that's on at Boylan and Western Boulevard that stops traffic in both directions so that people can cross into the Dix property. Things like that have not been done. There are only 3 traffic signals that I can think of right now in that whole stretch from coming off 40, going out towards Sunnybrook, maybe 4, even down to Jones Sausage. That area in the morning from 6:30 until 8 o'clock, the traffic is horrendous. There's a problem with people dropping their children off at school. The entrances and the exits have the barricades, so they can't go in certain driveways. So they pull up in front of the barricades, put their flashes on, and let their kids out. And so it is a terrible situation that needs to be addressed before any other development occurs. I think that deserves attention, that and the stormwater. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Yep.
The clerk's office put 2 minutes on the clock, and I think Ms. Gill used all 2. So I think we should let Ms. Talley speak and then just maybe give 4 minutes to the other side.
To other side, yeah.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I am Virginia Talley, and I am a native of Raleigh and a resident of Atkins Drive, which my family and I have lived there for over 40 years. I am representing the residents of the community who live within 500 feet or more, or even less, from the property on Compassionate Drive. Many of us homeowners are senior citizens who have worked tirelessly to keep up our property that we are proud of, and are finally able to enjoy the fruits of our labor, which we would also like to continue before leaving this earth. We are deeply concerned that a proposed construction project of 200-plus apartment units consisting of 3- and 4-story buildings could potentially and drastically impact our existing community of single-family homes. With the construction of these enormous units and their location, we anticipate many safety challenges, just to name a few. Increased safety, congestion, especially at key intersections, safety concerns of higher traffic volumes, landscape buffers, water retention, fencing, traffic patterns at entrances and exits, and the list goes on. But we have other concerns that at this time will not permit us to share regarding the proposed construction project. Therefore, until our concerns are properly addressed, we are in opposition to the rezoning and construction project on Compassionate Drive at this time. And we are specifically requesting a review of the site plan prior to final approval of the Compassionate Drive project. We recognize the need for additional housing and development in our community. However, it is essential to ensure that infrastructure keeps pace with growth to maintain the quality of life for existing residents. We respectfully ask this council to consider working collaboratively with our community members, developers, and others who are involved to create a solution that would benefit everyone. Thank you for your time and effort. With all of our community, please stand. We just want to show who you are. Thank you. We had one to go out. Thank you all so much. Again, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now we'll put, I would say, 4.5 minutes, back on the clock for the, for Ms. Kraut and the other, so 4.5 minutes.
First, we just thank you for the additional time. On both sides, we know that there are big issues here.
Hang on one sec. Lou, it was 4.5, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I can wait.
We have to be very precise with this because it's a public hearing. That's, you know that, but just for the.
Yeah, you're good.
All right.
All right. No, we understand these issues, and we really have been working to address them. In terms of, Standard Communities is a partner and they're a neighbor. They're here for 15, 30 years in the community. They manage this. They have active role in this community, so they're committed to being a good partner and a good community member. We do want to touch briefly on traffic and stormwater. Traffic, we understand the issues with Compassionate Drive. It's why we took so long between the first neighborhood meeting and submitting the rezoning application. We studied ownership, we studied potential design alternates, because if Compassionate Drive doesn't work, then this project doesn't work. And it doesn't just not work for this project, it works for any project in the future here. So in order for this property to be developed ever, it's a 10-acre vacant tract of land. Compassionate Drive needs to be improved. And so we're working hand in hand with NCDOT and Raleigh Planning staff and transportation to figure out what that looks like. And we are 1,000% supportive of a traffic light at this stop. It's just a holistic conversation. We had a conversation with transportation and NCDOT last week, and this entire area, as you heard, is under study. So it's not a question that can be resolved in the next 3-4 weeks. It's a question that we're committed to working with NCDOT and transportation over the next several months. And we're willing to do that. We want that. We want to front load it. We want to have this conversation now, once the rezoning is done, to make sure the project works. So safe access is our goal. For stormwater, same thing. We understand the stormwater concerns. We have talked with stormwater staff about it. We have engineers here on both the traffic side and stormwater side to answer any specific questions. But right now, there's no treatment controls on this property. With this development, we would then be treating for the 100-year flood event that would hopefully improve and give this water somewhere to go. So we're willing to work on that. We're willing to treat it. I would also just note, we are under deadlines for the affordable housing funding. We've been told by Raleigh FTA that we need approval in hand by April 1st. So while we're willing to come back, we would ask that we could come back at the March 18th hearing if you want to see additional conditions related to stormwater and height. We're also willing to tweak that traffic light condition to kind of signal that we're going to front load it in the site planning process and not kind of further on. But a lot of these concerns, we understand them, but they're major site planning concerns that we can't even get past a preliminary site plan review until we address them. And they're appropriate for that process versus this rezoning. But we are committed to addressing all of them.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Timport.
Yeah, thank you. I know that we've had some conversations as well, and given some of the comments tonight, it sounds like some folks in the community have not had an opportunity to hear about the proposals as it relates to the 100-year storm, maybe some of the anticipated tweaks as it relates to traffic analysis and the height. Understanding that you want to come back on the 18th, would it be possible for you to do some type of quick meeting with the folks in the community to at least walk through some of these proposals and give them opportunity to better understand what you've got planned and the additional conditions that you would submit?
Sure. In terms of timing, we'd have to submit any revised conditions by Friday, so that conversation would have to happen in the next couple of days. But if we can put a Zoom call or something together to make that work, we'd be willing to do that. These conditions are the same that were fully presented and talked through at the Planning Commission as well, but we wanted to have conversations with you before we made any tweaks.
Councilor Lambert Melton.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, normally this should be a case that the entire community can join together and celebrate, but I understand that there are some legacy concerns here with the stormwater and the traffic, and probably a part of the city that's been ignored for a really long time by previous leaders. And so, I think the faith-based community stepping up and saying we want to provide workforce housing on our land is exactly how we want to move forward. But I also hear the concerns from the long-term community members. And a lot of it, I think, becomes really technical. We talk about UDO and all these acronyms that Councilmember Silver has pointed out. And what I heard today was a few things. One, that some of what was being presented today, some of the community members are saying they're seeing it for the first time. And so if there is an opportunity just to have a conversation and explain things in simple terms to people, because I don't even understand half of the time, about what will happen with the stormwater. How could this actually maybe improve the area? And then the other part of it is, I did hear some tangible feedback from the first speaker about if it's going to be 200 units, condition it to 200. If it's going to be 52 feet, condition it to 52 feet. And those are things I think you could submit before Friday, because those are pretty clear. There were simple things like, can there be a sidewalk on both sides of the street? I don't know if that's feasible. I understand anytime you're adding an improvement, you're raising costs, and this is an affordable project. But those are just some tangible things that I heard, plus the what we can do to work together on the legacy concerns about the traffic and the stormwater.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Branch and then Councilor Harrison.
So a couple things. I definitely agree with putting those limits in that you're saying you're going to have to do. But also, I want to ask on staff, if staff can get with the community to talk about their stormwater issues that have not been addressed, because some of these things are items not related to this project that, need to be addressed. Some of these things, I'm just gonna be honest with you, some of these things I just heard tonight since I've been on council, because no one's brought it to my attention. So I can't address what I don't know about. So if we can just address those issues as far as the stormwater. I do want to ask if traffic staff, transportation, can come up and just briefly speak what are some of the requirements that would go into this redevelopment. I heard there was no traffic light. I know there's a Hawkeye that's right almost 500 feet from this area, so that allows students to cross the road. But I know any improvement at that intersection where Compassionate comes out, there's certain things that are required. You mentioned design alternative. That's with the one sidewalk, but staff can start with what's required, and then everything else is technical.
Are you asking what's required at the Compassionate Rock Quarry intersection?
Correct.
So that rock quarry being an NCDOT road, that access and final say is going to be up to them. And so we won't have any say about that decision until we can look at the traffic study and give feedback, see if that's appropriate in that area.
And that'll be for any type of project at this area, correct?
Yes.
All right. And do we know, I understand from the applicant, there's already a warrant that you're planning or have started. Can you give?
It's in the conditions that we have. We've conditioned it to do a traffic signal warrant analysis, and if it warrants it, we've committed to building it. And we've already started those conversations with NCDOT to get that rolling.
And you're willing to put that on the front end of your project instead of later?
Absolutely.
Is what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Councilor Harrison.
Yeah, just a couple items. I do agree that I think the heights should be conditioned down based on what is actually proposed to be built. I'd like to see that. I am concerned about just traffic in general in the area, and I don't know the area well enough, except for I think sometimes when I've gone to the amphitheater and had a lot of issues where I couldn't even get to a show until it was halfway over. And I can only imagine if you live there and you're trying to get to your home. So I don't totally understand or know much about any plans for improvement there. Is that something you can speak to?
So December of '24, the state actually completed the road widening project. So this will be our first year that we will know the impact of the improvements of the roads with the concert series.
Okay, great. That's great to hear.
They already got one, right at the bus stop. They push the button, it comes on, and you still got disrespectful traffic that runs it. Won't even stop. Won't even stop. Put a camera. Every
So-
time they run that light for those kids.
Yeah. So, again, thank you for the info. Our new police chief is here. Can you follow back up on traffic with the district captain on that, as far as what's happening at that Hawkeye? And because we need to fix existing issues, but then there's some things that we have to deal with as far as this case. I would like to just give it some more time to hold this until the 18th. Please reach out to the neighbors, meet with the neighbors. I think you have contacts you can schedule tonight on how to move forward. And then staff, if staff can, hopefully by the 18th, I'm just asking if staff can also reach out to NCDOT and give us an idea of NCDOT requirements that would be needed. So that would be on my motion to hold us until March 18th.
Second, your motion.
Yep, Councilor Patton.
Unrelated to the motion, just another thing that I heard in the community conversation is that might be actionable is that it sounds like maybe like some work with the school on the traffic queuing for pickup and drop off would be fruitful. It sounds like there's people pulling over because maybe the carpool line is not. So.
The actually where they're talking about where people are pulling up is not where the school wants people to drop people off. It's people breaking the rules.
Yeah, and I'm to say that in other areas of the city, we have put like no parking or no stopping, no standing zones, other things like
There's no parking on that street.
Yeah, the people breaking the rules are not going to abide by the signs.
Yeah, they're breaking the rules now.
That's the problem.
So.
Yeah.
So what they're doing, they're taking the easy route, dropping them off real quick, and hopefully I can get out real fast and go to work as a parent.
Yeah.
All I do is drop my kid off and say,
See, now we got Chief Boyce on board, so it's all going to be. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I think there's definitely a lot of issues between the stormwater, the traffic, the school, signals. So it sounds like I appreciate Councilor Branch, your suggestions and others. So we will leave this open until the 8th. Okay, to leave it open. Okay, so we will vote on the motion to leave the hearing open. All in favor of that motion, aye. Aye. All opposed. And we do understand the time limitations. And I would also just say, I think we're appreciative that a church is doing this. I mean, that's the faith community and looking at housing. And we also appreciate some of the legacy issues that exist in this area. And we will look forward to working with you over the next few days and coming back on March 18th.
And I just want to add, just for consideration, we could take some of these issues perhaps to committee, that are beyond this case around the traffic to understand all of the different factors, or stormwater, for example, to go to growth and natural resources.
Yeah, let's deal with the current thing first, and then work through all of these issues.
Okay. So with that, thank you all for being here, and that is the last case of the evening. So with no objection, we are adjourned.